This is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. I am very excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, I want to pick a quote. Well, I want to share a quote that I picked special for this podcast. Let's see if I can remember it. This is a special one. For every 100 men, 80 are targets. 10 of them shouldn't even be there. Of the 10 that are left, 9 of them are real fighters. And we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. But one is a warrior, and he will bring the others back. Heraclitus. See, we believe here at Culture Matters that when people read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, and speak to let go, they develop more value for themselves and others. So the purpose of our podcast is to uncover the genius of our guest, with the goal to make you, the listener, your curiosity cool, because our vision is that human culture is focused, open, curious, and focused on creating the future. So our mission is to read, write, listen, and speak every single day. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to a dear friend of mine who I had the pleasure of meeting at a conference in June of 2018. Shout out to Jeremy Haynes, the Internet Earner Summit. And I knew when I saw this person, our guest, speaking from stage, I knew that I would become friends with him. I didn't know how I would do it or how it would occur, but I remember having a conversation with my significant other, Jenna, and I remember her saying to me, dude, that guy knows he's strong. He knows things. And sure enough, we hit it off at that event. Jeremy Adams, our guest, is the founder of, the host and creator of Openly Outspoken, the founder of the Founders Mastermind. I'm excited to get into that. And the CEO of Unicorn Innovations. He is a warrior that has been bringing people back, business development, connector, super person, for years and years and years. And it's a great honor to have him on the Culture Matters podcast. I thank you, brother, for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it was so, I haven't been interviewed on any podcasts in a really long time by design, right? I like having people come to me. That's something I've shifted. I think a lot of that has to do with our conversations, but thank you for the kind words about that presentation in 2018. That presentation, that was the first time I ever did that presentation.
Wow.
And going to do that, something I've struggled with for a long time is, am I an expert at anything? What advice or what value can I share with the audience? So not only was it the first time that I ever did that presentation, which I've only done it maybe 2 or 3 total times, but I went into it really nervous if it was going to provide good value. I kind of saw other speakers that are quote unquote experts on things, and I even saw your presentation and I felt the same way around you. I'm like, this guy is a smart dude. So I appreciate that. But just so you know, I went into it super nervous and unsure if it would actually provide value.
How did you prepare mentally to overcome that doubt? Would you call it doubt?
I would say I've generated over, especially during my 20s, just the strength to fight through the doubt. So I went up on stage still having the doubt. I think that's really important, right? Is not trying to make or pretend that these feelings don't exist, but just kind of recognizing them and saying, hey, it's okay to have this doubt, because you're presenting in, whatever reasons, right? You're presenting in front of a bunch of people that don't know who you are. You're covering a topic that at the Internet Earners Summit, a topic that really didn't even have to do with online marketing per se, right? So I think it was just telling myself it was okay to have this doubt and these insecurities, and that's normal. And that really it was, I think Max helps me with these sorts of things too, because he and my partnership is the, more of the marketing expert, and I'm more the relationship biz dev vision of everything we're doing. And he reminds me, he's like, dude, you're great at all these things, and you forget how good you are because you just do it so effortlessly. He's like, so some of the stuff you're talking about seems so common sense to you, but it's probably not common sense to most people in the room. So just that type of reinforcement. But yeah, ultimately I went up on stage with a lot of insecurity and a lot of doubt that I was going to do well. But fortunately, a lot of people shared really good feedback and wanted to connect with me afterwards, and including you and Jenna.
What was for those that weren't there, don't know what you spoke on, what did you speak on, and what's the value of that talk or that idea, what you were teaching?
Yeah, it was really, I can't remember the exact title of the presentation, but it was something along the lines of, living your ideal lifestyle with high ticket consulting, right? So many people in the marketing world, agency space specifically, essentially they're charging for their knowledge and time and energy and experience. And for years, when Max and I started, we were, I would say, kind of middle of the pack when it came to what we charged. Maybe like a few grand a month, $5,000 a month, whatever, just whatever agencies charge for. We were running paid ads, but I felt from our experience and skill level, we should be, charging a lot more, right? So I believe that it was a combination of two things that just motivated me to charge way more. Being around in our agency with Kevin Harrington, Kevin, a lot of things we agree on, a lot of things we don't. But one thing he was great at was he just had a really big mindset. He'll be like, he was the first person in my life that regularly told us we were going to build a company to 100+ million. Like, he's just like, yeah, we're going to build this to 100 million. Like, we were just like having lunch. He's like, yep, it's going to be 100 million. Like, I was like, whoa, that's, big thinking. So I think one positive of my relationship and agency with him was just the bigger thinking. And then we started focusing on our own projects and our education space. And I was like, we don't even want to do too much consulting, but if we're going to do it, it's going to have to be this. Like, everything's for sale, I suppose, at a price point for every person. At our Founders Mastermind, Dan Henry just did a little example of that. He's just like, how many of you would mow a lawn for $100? And no one in our audience raised their hand. He's like, how many would mow a lawn for $1,000? Maybe like 4 people raised their hand. And then out of our group, and he's like, how many would mow it for $10,000? Almost everybody in the room. For 30 minutes for 10 grand, most people on this planet would probably mow that lawn. I think not everybody still raised their hand, but most did, right? So that's kind of was the point, was everything's for sale if the price is high enough. And that was our mindset. So we went from being like $3 or $5 a month to, we're like, we're going to be minimum 10 grand if anybody wants to work with us. And there were just different ways to build relationships and build trust and authority to start charging 10 grand. And then we bumped that up to 15 grand. We're going to be 15 grand minimum month. So we never had a gigantic agency, and I never really wanted to build that, but we would, at a time back then, I think we built up, over 100 grand or so in monthly retainers.
Amazing.
Right? With a really lean team with not that many clients, right? It doesn't take, if you do the math, too many clients to get there. And it was just a much easier lifestyle. So we had quite a bit of high profit revenue coming from this. So that's the presentation I gave, was how to position yourself as an authority to charge a premium and earn what you deserve selling your knowledge.
What was your process, and has it evolved even over time, of choosing those that you'd accept larger than you'd normally ask for? And what are you looking for in those that you'd help? Because it makes sense. You can't work with everybody at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the wild thing about price points, especially, so I think it's important to distinguish that when you have a commodity, obviously there's only so much that you can charge, right? Toilet paper, maybe there's a market for $1,000 roll toilet paper, but it's going to be really tough. So, but when you're a personalized service, especially B2B, which is people are working with you to grow their business, it's an investment. Like, I would correct people. It'd be like, oh, you guys cost $50 a month. I'm like, we don't cost anything. This is an investment because you're going to like grow this area of your business, right? So the wild thing that I learned though, just having the higher price point, no matter what, people automatically think you're the best. So that was a realization for me. And they would be like, you're more than we expected to pay for something like this, but we've had so many bad experiences that we're ready to hire the best. So something about being like the top 1% of price point in a B2B service, probably not even top 1%, top 5%, right? Higher price than the other 4 people they talked to. That was very common. That people would be like all the time, wow, you're way more than the other people. I was like, yeah, I know. We definitely are. We are way more. I agree.
It looks like
I agree with that.
I'm laughing because your face, right?
Well,
You're like, were you like, what were you thinking at that point? And then how did it? Yeah. What were you? And then how did it work out?
Yeah, I mean, so when you're a certain price point, you automatically, for whatever reason, and I mean, if you think about a $10,000 purse, right, or a $10,000 watch, I don't even need to tell you the brand of the watch, but in your mind, you're probably like, it's probably a pretty nice watch, right? That without even knowing anything about the watch company, the founders, I mean, they could literally just be like pulling watches out of a lake or something. You don't know. You're just like, it could be a very nice watch. So it started naturally attracting higher end people at just the price point.
Wow.
So it
powerful.
And it, weirdly enough, it kind of vetted the people for us. Once people knew, we would let them know very on in the process. Some people weren't a fit, and that's okay. But the people that were a fit and we did want to work with, they started gravitating towards it because and most B2B type services, they've probably been burned in the past. They have some pain points. So they most often, when they're trying to grow their business, they're willing to invest more if they're comfortable that it's going to grow their business. And that's what we realized is we automatically, from that price point, we had a good background and experience too, but I know people with just as good of backgrounds and experiences that were charging half of what we were. And that still charge half of what we are. We were just talking to an agency the other day that we may retain services, and they're really well respected in the space. And I think their minimum retainer was like $5,000. On my head, I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, you need to be higher priced than that, right? So, yeah, it was just it, and I was scared at first to say that, but once I saw the light, and once I saw how people were like, okay, yeah, that's fine. It was the same exact process. I told myself like, hey, there has to be a way to help other marketing professionals do the same thing. So long story short, I guess there wasn't a long story short. Long story long, that's what I ended up making the presentation about, and a lot of people got good value from it.
You said something really interesting to me earlier of it's not a cost. It's getting you to hear. Can you elaborate on that? Like, because I'm thinking someone listening is thinking, well, what justifies if I charge more and then I do it and then it doesn't work or something of that nature? Can you elaborate on that really profound distinction?
Yeah, I mean, most business owners, you, me, I mean, anybody that manages cash flow, the last thing anybody wants is a large cost on a P&L statement or a large withdrawal, and they're logging to the Bank of America account. Oh, wow, that's a big chunk of cash that just came out last month. No one wants that, and I agree with people. Like, hey, we like to keep expenses as minimal as possible. We're growing our business too. I just want to be very clear. Like, this is an investment in your growth. You have a team like us. And a lot of people would want to work with Max, for example. For whatever reason, they saw him on stage. They took one of his educational courses. I mean, you have a team that has managed some of the biggest e-com brands in the country, and we're going to be looking at your accounts daily. And having team member like us, I think you would agree, is important, right? And then at that point, once they see the vision and once they see, okay, yeah, I like that experience. And I'm not bullshitting. I mean, this is the truth. We've managed really big brands. We deserve to be top tier pricing. But at that point, if they're sold on the vision and having us as like that partner, whether it's 10 grand, 15 grand, I mean, there's some elasticity, so you probably couldn't charge $1 million a month, right? But that's not as important once they're sold on the vision of the partnership and how the business can grow. All right. So, getting them excited about the partnership, at that point, the extra few grand a month or whatever it is a lot less important. And that's
how did you and your partners gain the competence at your craft?
Trial and error, and just having a lot of successes, having a lot of failures, getting really clear on who we thought we were a good fit to help. What we did as well, which I would say for anybody listening and selling anything high ticket, what I'm about to say is super crucial too, because we would schedule audits. And by the way, at first we would do the audits for free. Big mistake, because nobody values what they don't pay for. And giving away stuff for free should be an absolute no. Even if, and I would tell people, I don't even care about the money at times, donate it to my favorite charity instead. It's not even about us getting that cash. It's about you giving a shit and what we're about to offer. But what we would do, and it would close 90% of the people, and for the people it wouldn't close, we would maybe say they're not a fit for us. But we would do some sort of audit where they would give us ad account access, and we would do a detailed report. Typically we'd charge $3,000 for it. And we'd let people know on the front end, hey, this is how the process goes. Here's an audit for $3,000. If we both decided to fit beyond that, it's $15,000 a month for, just, by the way, that's just our services. That's not including any ad spend or anything like that. So just somebody to justify $15,000 a month probably is spending $50,000 to $100,000 plus in ads, right? So, and we would just paint the picture.
When you say ads, just for those that may have not be following your specific business yet, what's the context of the ads? What are we talking about? If you could bring this to the layman.
Yeah, Facebook and Google ads. So typically some sort of info product or e-com store or something where they're looking to spend a lot of money on Facebook and Google, which obviously Facebook and Google, that's Facebook desktop, Facebook mobile, Instagram, and then Google could be search, display, YouTube, right? That's primarily, and occasionally we would offer some traffic channels beyond that, but between those two behemoths, there is plenty of room for growth.
Is it a industry, a science that if you could throw money, it just won't work without the intellectual property?
Ask that again.
Is it a type of service where someone could throw money at it? They could throw $1 million and get less back of return on their investment as a business owner than even investing a tenth of that in a more methodical, intentional way.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, that's why people would gladly pay us many times the retainer we were asking, because say you were a big brand we've been working with as of late is Audits, right? Audits is Joe Rogan and Aubrey Marcus founded that.
Yeah, they're beasts. Wow.
Yeah, still haven't met Joe Rogan, by the way, but maybe it'll happen, or Aubrey. But we've driven a lot of traffic for them. So say and I don't know Audits' exact revenue, but many millions a month, and we've been I don't know what they're doing, like retail and other traffic channels and stuff like that, but they're doing quite a bit of revenue. Say you're a supplement brand that has somewhat of a similar product. Who else would you want to help you grow from a traffic standpoint than someone that just did it with another brand, right? So once you have that credibility and trust, what that price point to get involved is a lot less important because they just want that right partner, because opportunity costs and time, right? I mean, do you want to spend a little bit more now, invest a little bit more now to have it done right, or give it, not even have it done right, give it the best chance for success? So we were very clear on expectations too. We never would promise crazy results. Like, hey, like, who knows what's going to happen? We're very confident, but if anybody's going to give this the best chance to succeed and get to the targets you want, it's going to be us. And I think people also appreciated that honesty. I would never overpromise results, because that's bullshit. People, especially,
have you ever done that?
Overpromised?
Yeah.
Maybe you're super early on
in your life.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah. You just learn to not do that though, because you're just setting yourself up for failure. I mean, overpromising is bad because you're setting yourself up for failure. And if you do get great results, that's what's expected. So, but if you underpromise, you're giving yourself up a little buffer. And if you get those better results, you're exceeding their expectations. So,
did you learn that from a mentor or a failure or some other source?
Mostly failures. Mostly failures. Like,
how do you define a failure?
Well, I guess there are no failures in the sense of learning. But my first company, Prestige Food Trucks, we were a custom manufacturer. So in our heads, we thought something may take 2 months to build an X budget. What would actually happen is 3 months and 30 grand over budget. So people would get really pissed if you told them 2 months and it took 3 months. But if we told them 3 months and it took 3 months, they were ecstatic. And the only difference in the whole customer experience was just letting them know on the front end, which is, it's not going to lose us any business. You know, like, hey, it's going to be 3 months instead of 2 months. Like, so it's that those expectations on the front end can be the difference in so many areas of life, right? Maybe even romantic relationships with family, any type of business. You know, setting proper expectations on the front end is crucial. So I think that also allowed us to twofold. I think people appreciated the honesty and they could tell we're not bullshitting them. And it gave us more buffer because no relationship is perfect. So when we had challenges, people kind of, and again, not that we didn't have really rough moments, but people kind of expected some of these challenges because they were laid out on the front end that it could be a possibility.
Everything you learned from leadership, business development, helping many businesses now, if you were to look in hindsight to, you said Prestige Food Trucking, what do you think it was internally or externally or both that could have been holding up that process to get something delivered on the time? Like, was it internal conflicts? Was it external conflicts? Was it both?
I mean, a million things. So food truck manufacturing, for example, I don't know if I'd wish on my worst enemy, just custom manufacturing in general, because especially me, I didn't have a manufacturing background, and there's people that have done this their whole life that have challenges, right? So when you're a custom manufacturer, every truck was like a little house. You'd have plumbing, electrical, cooking equipment, refrigeration equipment, generator, mechanical for the truck itself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we would rely on multiple suppliers for metal, for wood, for installing the equipment. And sometimes it would be as simple as, hey, we don't have this one piece in, so that's going to delay the build a month, right? Like, that's a really simple way to put it, but sometimes it could be one supplier that has like a shortage on this thing, and we need A, B, and C before we can install D, E, and F. So sometimes it was as simple as that. Sometimes it was we would get too many orders in a short window, and because of custom ordering, some months we'd have 7 orders, some months we'd have 2. So it's really hard to manage labor from that sense. There was internal conflict. There was poor leadership skills from my end at times. There was stuff as little as, I remember one time I got a new car, and then everybody on the staff wanted a raise because they felt they were underpaid, you know, and it was like a little strike within the organization. Wow. And I was like, dude, this is a lease. It's like a $500 a month lease. The wild thing is, at that time, I had 2 staff members taking a higher salary than me as an owner because I was so focused on like making that business successful. So, they like managing how others perceive me. That was a new challenge. It was a lot of different things, but custom manufacturing, there's just so many variables, many of which can be out of the company's control because we're relying on so many different vendors and so many custom things that, just one thing could delay the project a month.
You were 2 when you started that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you always believe that you'd end up an entrepreneur, or when you were growing up, you wanted to be like a fireman?
I never wanted to be a fireman, but I did want to be wealthy. I would tell myself I'm going to be rich. I didn't like where I grew up per se. I didn't like the surrounding. I grew up next to a bunch of really low income people, just low income environment, low income mindsets. Looking back at it, that was probably the thing more than anything, was the low income mindset. I mean, I had like my family was my mom and my stepdad both worked just regular working class jobs. I mean, I don't know, just basic labor jobs until later in high school. My stepdad went back to school and became a teacher, but just very low income mindset. My example of that would be I had friends that would buy furniture from rent to own and buy TVs, and for a $600 TV they're paying $3,000, and then they don't,
oh my gosh,
they don't pay that off even. So after $1,500 of payments, their TV would get repoed. And a lot of drug addicts for parents and alcoholics, and it was just a very low income, small thinking environment that I knew at a very young age I didn't want to be around. And I thought wealth was the solution, and wealth is one of the solutions.
How old were you when you thought that?
I mean, probably 5th grade or something.
Wow.
At first, I think that's the far back for. I would probably say I was going to be rich before that, but that's when I remember having conscious thoughts about not liking my environment. And my dad lived in Orlando, and I just remember I'd visit him on occasion, and I just remember like the city over Orlando, which in retrospect, Orlando is far from a giant downtown or anything, but compared to where I grew up in the woods, down a bunch of dirt roads with mobile homes and stuff, it was just, I thought there was so much opportunity and excitement. So I knew I was going to move to Orlando when I was capable and able.
If you think part of that upbringing is partly why the Openly Outspoken has been so popular?
Popular is subjective.
Yeah, so I guess I think that the popular people you're having a very, very unique. I follow it, and a lot of different guests, very, very different opinions. It's not one dimensional is what I mean by popular. There's all sorts of different people coming together. You're having these very important conversations. Maybe if someone looked at you, they'd think, hey, he grew up in an upper echelon.
I just reek of white. I reek of white privilege. You mean I reek?
I mean, like is that part of the fuel? Do you think that actually impelled you to be outspoken? Because I did research, and Akale, I mean, it's
Ocala.
Maybe I'm saying it wrong.
That's okay. That's not it's well, and I tell people Ocala because Ocala is actually kind of a bigger town, but I didn't grow up in Ocala. I grew up in Ocala Metro. I grew up in a town called Silver Springs, which is just a little tiny woods town outside of Ocala. I say Ocala because I just don't feel like explaining to everybody where Silver Springs is. So I say Ocala, but it's actually Silver Springs. It's a little tiny town, 20 minutes outside of Ocala.
Yeah, so my question is, do you think you'd be doing all the things you're doing now, bringing light to, and if anyone listening I was about to give your podcast a shout out, and then I just realized we're on your podcast simultaneously.
That's okay. I mean, people are going to listen to your podcast too, so.
Well, and there's two people right now I can think of. Bill Dallas, who was recently on episode 85. He grew up like Hillbilly Elegy, that Netflix show, if you haven't seen it. And Christine Beckett, who we just did an event together, who grew up in a trailer park. Two of the most successful humans I've ever met.
Yeah, I mean, growing up.
Do you think you'd be doing all this? That you're an influencer, if you hadn't.
Influencer subjective too, but yeah, I think what we have in common, Jay, and I actually was just thinking about this the other day. You and me are both influencers of influencers. We have a knack for creating relationships with people that influence a lot of people. I think what you and me, like our brains, don't necessarily align with the masses, but they align with influencers. They align with other really smart, successful people, and I've been very fortunate. I've had a skill to do that at a young age, and I think that's something we have in common. But yeah, I mean, definitely my upbringing has a lot to do with what I do today, right? I think that it just I still never forget the value of a dollar, and it makes me challenge just super stereotypical comments in the world today about all the privilege you have with being white and just things like that. When I grew up in a town of mostly white people that were super low income, that a lot of them were on government assistance, that ton of family issues, like shit getting repoed, had no money, just drama, drug addiction, and they're white, right? So not like, so when wow. We're all, as humans, we have a lot of similar issues, right? And I guess I just, growing up around that, I've just believed for a long time it's a lot more about class than race, right? LeBron James kids, Kevin Hart's kids, black, they're going to have a lot more advantages, in my opinion, than the white families that I grew up around. So not that race isn't an issue, not that we still can't improve in prejudices and stuff, which we have tons of prejudices. That ageism, I think, is a big one now. We talk shit about old people, and that's accepted, whatever reason. But
yeah.
You can't talk about a race poorly, but you can just say someone's fucking old and dumb and losing it or whatever. But yeah, I think class, and I challenge a lot of talking points just because of where I grew up. So
what do you had that idea young that you would be somewhere else? Are there any things that happen that increase that likelihood, or meaning, because are there things that happen that were you confronted with obstacles that could have totally took you off the track and put you in a really bad place, and you were able to overcome those obstacles? Like, were you let's say, you're outside and someone comes up to you with an idea, like, let's go over here and do this bad thing. And you're like, no, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So, it's just, I'm trying to think, because I have my own story, but I'm not in your particular circumstance. So were you ever confronted with choices to do things that would have landed you in a different place than you are today?
Absolutely. I mean, especially small town vibe, right? I mean, countless amounts of kids I went to high school with, their parents went to the same high school. I mean, if you just think that's so less common in bigger cities, and but one of my best friends, his dad went to the same high school that we went to, and it's just So from my experience in smaller towns, lower income areas, a lot of my friends had kids early. A lot of my
Oh wow.
a lot of which is not unique to Ocala, right? I mean,
Wait, but how early though?
lower income, lower educated humans um, earn less and have kids younger and are likelier to be in legal trouble. I mean, there's again class, which is why I go back to that. Class, I think, is the biggest issue that it's kind of talked about, but we just keep looking the other way because race seems to overtake that. But I mean, parties and just that type of lifestyle. I never really went to parties. I didn't really drink or do anything like that in high school. So um, I got into gaming young. I didn't really hang out with a bunch of girls. I didn't have a lot of confidence from that sense. So I think I just never felt comfortable in that environment of just a bunch of drinking and drugs, and so I just kind of like stuck to myself, and really wanted to work hard. So I got my first job at Bob Evans right after I turned 16. So my birthday's in March, and I think maybe in April or May of, I guess that'd be 2006, I just walked in as the first ever place I applied. I walked in, I had like one nice shirt, and my mom would go to every Sunday. She would go to Walmart to grocery stop and grocery shop. Right across the street was a place called Bob Evans, a little breakfast place. And I walked in there, and the manager, I said, "Can I talk to the manager?" And I said, "Hey, I like want a first job. I'm willing to do whatever. I want to just learn and help you guys," or some version of that when I was 16. And she interviewed me right on the spot, and then I had like my second interview like a couple days later, and they hired me. And that was just my focus. It's like I just want to work. I just want to work and earn money and save money. And so that was always my focus over social or partying or girls or anything like that for, probably until I was 19, 20, 21. It shifted a little, but I still to this day am not a big, like I'll drink on occasion or smoke a little weed on occasion or whatever, but it's still not a big part of my life.
Did you ever entertain at that time, 16, 17, the idea of college or trade school?
Mainly because society, actually I'll clear that up a little. Instead of society, public education, because of I think a lot of lobbying and financial commitments. I mean, you are told probably starting in middle school that if you don't go to college, you're going to be a big fucking loser. That was the narrative that I remember hearing, and so I would feel obligated to go to school, but I never really liked school, so I never liked the idea of going to college. I actually thought by the time, so I worked from Bob Evans from 16 to 19. By the time I was 18, I would train other servers, people a lot older than me, right? I'm 18 years old. Yep. I would manage the night shift. I much more liked the idea at the time of working my way up through that. I mean, I probably could have been a manager if I wanted by the time I was like 20, which a restaurant manager, big deal, but they're a publicly traded company. I probably could have worked my way up and, worked my way up if that's the route I wanted to go. But at the time, I thought that was way more appealing than college. I just felt obligated from society, from friend groups, from my parents. So I just started taking a few college classes just out of guilt, I suppose.
What were the classes?
I can't even remember, like basic stuff, probably the easiest classes I could pick. And I still think I failed one of them. Just because of it just didn't keep my attention. But I took a few classes in Ocala, and then I paused for a while. Eventually moved to Orlando, took a few more classes, and then just like dropped out.
And I'm about to ask this because you actually read a lot and do a lot of audiobooks today. Were there classes that you were drawn to at all?
Economics. I enjoyed economics because I thought it was the most applicable to real life and me being wealthy. I'm like, this seems like a good class. PowerPoint, I failed that class, like stuff like Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. Not because I wasn't good at it. I think I built my old computers and my own computers and install operating systems. So I was like a big tech and gaming nerd. Like I could use Microsoft Word like the best of them. I just thought it was the biggest waste of time to like show my Microsoft Word skill to anybody. I thought that was so stupid and I couldn't force myself to do it. But yeah, I think economics type classes. I also kind of enjoyed business calculus. I got an A in it, I remember, just because they would have real life examples from Apple, and I can't remember exactly what the examples were, but I remember corporations, like real life examples from successful companies. So I thought those types of classes were interesting. But outside of that, I thought it was a giant waste of time. Like accounting, for example, I failed that too because I'm like, I'm never gonna do my own accounting. This not only is this not my strength, I will never do my own accounting in business. You can hire great people to do that stuff for you. So
you were already thinking in those terms. Did you have a mentor at that time? Whether spoken or unspoken?
Kind of. Maybe when I was 20, 21. Well, I guess managers at the restaurants and stuff. There was this first manager I had when I was 16. He was my hiring manager. And I still, to this day, I try to track him down. But he was probably the biggest influence on me. Like, I don't know what it is, but he saw something in me and he would challenge me and give me a hard time and hold me to a really high standard compared to other staff members. But he really got a lot out of me. I think he was good at having me just get out of my own way and get out of my head and get past my ego and just have me work hard. So like he was maybe the first guy like in work that I really like admired. And then yeah, I just, again, for whatever reason, I've always been able to get along with older men, probably more than older women. Not that I don't get along with older women, but older men I've been drawn to, and I just like learning from them. And so I think even at our age right now, we're about the same age. Like yep. if a 20-year-old kid who's about 10 years younger than us, if they came up to you and me super curious and wanted to learn, you kind of like helping if they're really curious, right?
Oh yeah, I've had people live with me.
Yeah, so I think I was just really curious, and I'm just like, this is where I want to be. Like, I'm a restaurant manager when I was 16. Not that they were super successful by any means, but they were ahead of me, and there's something that they could teach me. So I think I always would just, like, ask questions about their life and how they got there and why they're doing what they're doing, and I think that's appealing to...
How important to success to you is curiosity?
I mean, pretty important. Like crucial if you want as an entrepreneur and doing what I did, not having kind of paving my own path, not going to college, not being told, or not completing college, I should say. I did take some classes, but not completing. Just kind of paving my own path. I think it gave me the opportunity to think about other ways, right? So, and gain confidence. I think that was a big thing for being curious and having these older male role models. Is it helped me gain a lot of confidence that I could be successful. Because it's one thing to tell yourself and want to be wealthy. It's another thing to actually have the confidence that you can achieve these things and that you deserve it. And I think that was crucial for me. It's just having the curiosity and getting the reinforcement from people ahead of me.
You interact with so many entrepreneurs now, especially, and we're going to get into it, the Founders Mastermind, but even before that and in your work, is this something you've noticed that other people that you may not even think of struggle with doubt in that way or confidence? They may have success, what you think is success, is something that you see?
That they struggle with confidence?
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody. The amount of stress and uncertainty I had with the Founders Mastermind to start literally kept me up at night and put knots in my back because of like the stress. I'm like, is this, people are flying from all over the country, all over the world. They're putting trust in me. They're leaving their families. I like, hopefully this goes well. Hopefully they enjoy it. Right. We're employing people. Like, hopefully it goes well. We're going to have to let those people go because, you know, this business isn't going to succeed. Right. So yeah, I mean, there was countless amounts of, uncertainties and insecurities and sleepless nights, literally sleepless nights. But I guess there's that higher power that it was like, regardless of that, I was just told myself if anybody could do it, I could do it. And I had some good people in my life reinforcing that it was going to go well. It's one thing for just people, random people in your life, to say it's going to go well. But it's another thing when there's somebody that you look up to or that is successful telling you it's going to go well. Because for me, I tend to believe that a little bit more. So I was fortunate to just have some good people that said, you know, hey, you're great at these things. If anybody's going to make this a success, it's you. And so I pushed through it, and it was extremely successful. Our first meetup it went better than I even anticipated.
How do you define that? A meeting of minds. How do you define success, and when it comes to that, what are you looking for? What are you looking to happen, and what did happen?
For what we have with founders, I think there's so many conferences out there. There's so much information out there. There's YouTube, there's conferences, there's courses, there's so much information, and I kind of feel information overload, and especially you and me both love Audible. If there's any information we want, I feel like I just read about it. Like if I'm having a challenge in my life, there's a book for it. 10 of them that are great, that are award-winning, that can probably help if I'm just seeking information. But what Audible can't do is create those relationships and have you feel loved and accepted and create friendships and memories and experiences. So I have really worked hard with founders in being about the relationships and the experiences. And I would tell, I don't, like kind of what you mentioned at the earlier, you said, hey, I remember meeting Jeremy at the conference. You probably don't remember any other presentation, right? I don't. But I remember your presentation and I remember us meeting. And that's what I wanted to create is a community, fraternity, sorority vibe, right? Just people can rely on one another. People can be friends. People can, you know, hey, you're in Miami, you know, sleep at my house, you know, don't get a hotel. Let's, you know, hang at my place for a couple days. You know, that type of friendship seems to be rare and rare, especially if for someone like me that didn't go to college, that didn't have like that group from a young age. I kind of just manifested it and worked hard to create it. So I wanted to focus on relationships and experiences, and I just had so many people share with me that they just met so many good people, and it was one of the best or the best group they've ever been a part of. And for me to hear that was really rewarding, because we worked really hard to cultivate a group of, when I say high quality people, let's say not obviously financial success is one, but people that are aware of their ego, and people that are looking to learn and grow, and people that know they're imperfect and that are going to be honest and authentic. And so it's a group of people that are just really like me, that are, you know, have some success but are looking for connection and friendships.
What sticks out to you that these qualities would not align with this culture?
Well, in our interview process with members, we would ask people what they're looking to get out of the group. And there will be people that will say, hey, I'm looking to grow my business. And by the way, who's in your group? You know, what type of people? And like, there would be certain people that we would interview, that a lot of people, that would be some sort of combination of the investment is too high, so you're automatically not a fit. Why would I pay this much to be around a bunch of people? Automatically not a fit. Who's in the group essentially that they can pitch? Not a fit. right? So, we had interview questions that would, if they made it through the end, they would, they were a really strong candidate. If we say, hey, what are you looking to get out of this group? I'm looking for friendships. I'm looking for just to hang out with cool people in our community. I'm looking to learn. I'm looking to grow. If someone said something along those lines, that's what we want in our community. We would ask people, what they liked and disliked about other groups or conferences they've been a part of, and a common theme of our members is, hey, like, we love presentations and stuff like that's good, but we really care about the people. I enjoy more than anything going out at night and having dinner and drinks and just getting to know people. And that there was just a lot of those common themes with the people that ended up being the perfect fit, that at the end I would tell them, like, hey, I think you're a perfect fit. This is what the investment is. And yeah, so we did our best to vet. And obviously from an energetic standpoint, if they know me, they know Max, they know Tim, there's some success level already. So the good thing is, because we marketed it really from internal list and word of mouth, so there was already an expectation of what the price point was going to be. They knew it wasn't going to be something low ticket, so most people came to the calls willing to invest. They filled out a 2-part application, so at that point it was just really about aligning and from a culture fit standpoint.
Do you think, what are your thoughts on the personal development industry and its evolution? Where do you think it's going?
I mean, for what we have with founders, I think personal development, and by that I mean just like increased self-awareness, increased just reduced suppression of feelings of emotions, just sharing, having joy. Like, I think that is what holds a lot of entrepreneurs back from success and from happiness, is the personal development component, which is why people came to founders expecting, I think, a bunch of marketing tactics and stuff like that, which I just burped there. So
it's all right. It's real.
People came expecting marketing tactics at some level, and they got a little bit of that, but what we delivered was more opportunity to work on themselves. And I think having that healthy balance of, because I realized there's most, like, if you think about like a coach and like a life coach or personal development coach, a lot of them are really good and they can help a lot of people, but they're horrible business owners and they don't earn money. Like, they have horrible businesses, right? If you think about the standard coach, like, they could impact so many lives, but they're just horrible business owners. And then there's the opposite, people really successful in business, but they lack self-awareness. They're kind of fake. So I'm doing my best to blend the two, having, not only a group that we can have tangible like ROI and grow our businesses, but also improve ourselves as humans and better our relationships and create friendships. And so I'm working really hard to have kind of the best of both worlds in our group.
I want to drop a mic on that, dude. That's a big deal.
Yeah, we had our first presenter, because with founders we think some content is important. So we have 3 speakers a day. So we work very hard to not have a conference vibe. It's 3 presenters a day with breaks in between to hang out, and so I'm very strategic about what the presenters actually talk about. And the first one, people have no idea what to expect. It's my good friend Dave, who is a very successful entrepreneur, but he's spent the last 10 years or so focusing on, coaching and personal growth and stuff, because that's what he's super passionate about. So, I intro him by, his business, has a multiple 9-figure year business. So like for every entrepreneur, if your business is doing 9-figure plus, that is probably the true definition of financial success. I mean, that is the top fraction of the top 1%. So I think it has credibility coming from a guy like that. So, people don't know what to expect, think it's going to be something about business, whatever. And I was nervous because I'm like, I wonder how the group's going to react to this. Essentially, it was a workshop about finding about what your genius is, what you're happy about, what you're happy doing, what you're passionate about. And multiple people at the end were like, Dave's segment was my favorite, right? And they no one expected to come into this mastermind and actually work on themselves. I mean, it was an hour and a half workshop by design. I mean, no one expected to have a 2-page sheet where they fill out a bunch of stuff, and it ended up being a huge success, right? So I had a gut feeling that it would be that, which is why I started the event that way. But yeah, people came in, maybe expecting like, hey, I'm going to learn some things, I'm going to meet some cool people. But it was actually, it was a workshop based on getting more clear on themselves.
What's the value of that? Someone's listening to this and thinking, I'm behind on my bills. I have a business, or maybe they have a job that they're like completely nihilistic about. I just need to make money. What's your advice to them? Like, how does any of that even get through?
Well, I got really big into personal development myself because of Dave, the guy I just mentioned. He was super financially successful, but I saw that he worked on himself. So I got into it initially with money motivation. I'm like, I don't know what he's doing, but if this is what wealthy people do, I want to do it too, right? And then once I think most of the time, from my experience and from friends I've talked to, once you have that epiphany of how personal work can improve your life, it just, a light switch goes off and you are kind of committed / partially addicted to it for the rest of your life. Like once you probably read your first Audible book, you're like, holy shit, it's just like, there is something here. So I think that's what happened. I went to this coaching group because I thought it's just what wealthy people do. So I'm like, we're going to probably be talking about wealth strategies, and it wasn't that at all, but it was a whole day of working on myself. And at the end of it, I was like, and there were tons of other successful people in the room. I'm like, fuck, maybe this is what I need to be doing. People were happy. People were very financially successful. I was like, this is the type of people that I want to be around. And not, so what was so special about this group when I first went to, people financially successful, but they were so open with their challenges and their insecurities. And I mean, there was literally a guy that every entrepreneur's dream is probably some sort of a big exit. So it's some big payday, right? And this gentleman in the group, we got partnered up, right? And it was years ago. And he, very, very wealthy guy, he shared, hey, I think he's in 60 or so at the time. I've been in this business for 35 years. I just sold it. Never has to work again a day in his life. Extraordinarily wealthy. But he's like, I have a non-compete for X amount of years, and I don't know what to do with my life now. And he was just genuinely going through a really tough time because he sold his business and he had all this cash or whatever, but all he did his whole life was this business. So he had to figure out what he was going to do, right? And that was eye-opening to me. So I'm just hearing all these vulnerable shares and people just being so open, and it's like, this is the path that feels right for me. It's like, of course I want to build wealth, and I value wealth and I value success, but like, let's grow and build self-awareness along the way. So that it's been something I've been really interested in ever since. And there's so many successful, quote unquote successful, financially successful, I'll say, entrepreneurs that I meet all the time that I felt that if they just, not that they have to be into Audible at like your and my level, but if they just started shifting a little bit into 80-20, 80% business, 20% personal growth, it would just shift their life for the better. And it was kind of a bold move with founders. I was like, these people think they need marketing tactics, and maybe they do, but what they really need is some personal work. And it ended up being a success, and a lot of people shared that they really enjoyed it.
When did you listen to your first Audible? And do you prefer Audible versus reading? Like, what are your, so when did you start first?
I can't remember exactly, but it was many years ago. It was the 4-Hour Workweek. And
Tim Ferriss.
That was the first audiobook I listened completely. And so I've always had a comprehension issue. I struggled, like, I was in remedial classes for reading some years in high school. I would score very high in math. I would score like top 1 percentile in math, but I would always score below grade level for reading and comprehension stuff, or right at or below, just very, very average. And I always struggled with that. Once I started getting past kindergarten level reading, I think that's pretty easy stuff, like trees and pears and basic kindergarten stuff. But yeah, that was always more of a struggle for me. And I figured out from Audible that is because I just always had a hard time comprehending stuff on paper. But
Wow.
Not that I didn't enjoy reading, I just had a hard time comprehending. But once I found out about Audible, it was life-changing for me because I comprehended audio very well. So that's when the light switch kind of happened for me, and which is unfortunate, right? I mean, I wish people consume information in different ways. And I've heard this theory before, and I feel it makes a lot of sense. We've consumed information via like audio, video style most of human history because we didn't have books. Books weren't mass produced until 500 years ago. So before that, people would consume information by listening to stories and maybe watching some sort of play and just talking and communicating. That's a much more natural way of consuming information because that's what humans have done throughout all of history, right? And that just was so much easier for me. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for kids in general to improve their comprehension and test results and stuff if there's alternative ways to consume this knowledge, because it just was always so hard for me, and I'd beat myself up about it and be like, why am I having such an issue?
Wow.
But then when audio, like now I'm into books that I would imagine I would be into about like world history and shit like that, because it's just I can comprehend it and it's interesting to me now. So I think it had to be maybe 2013, 2014 when I started getting into to Audible.
How did you add it into your life at 2013, 14? You were at that point, you had the trucking business, which sounds like a lot of fun to manage at the time, and so you already were an entrepreneur. So you had all these responsibilities, employees already that you're talking about. How did you incorporate audio learning into your life?
I believe it was as simple as just somebody recommending it on a plane flight. I think it was,
wow.
Hey, we have a few hours to kill. I think this was before it was so common. Like now planes, pretty much all major like cross-country flights have some sort of screen, or you have Wi-Fi on every plane now. But I think it had to be 2013, 2014. It was starting to become more common, but it wasn't on like every flight. So I think I had a lot of time to kill, and somebody recommended an audiobook, and I don't know if I just stumbled upon 4-Hour Workweek, but I remember being consumed and just being like, holy shit, this was great. Because 4-Hour Workweek was great because it was just a slight shift in mindset. He just was talking about having other people do these basic tasks instead of you, which seems so obvious as an entrepreneur, but as a first-time business owner, that was game-changing for me because I'm like, yeah, it does make sense to have people do these things instead of me doing it, so I can focus on the more important aspects of the business. So I remember just having tangible, applicable advice for my own life. And then it just was I went down a rabbit hole of all different types of books. I think I was addicted to business books for the first couple years. I don't think I read a non-business book for
Wow.
2 years. But then after you read enough business books, I feel that they all kind of sound the same. So beyond that, I started expanding into...
Is there a number roughly that you think, if someone's listening to this, they read it, like, is it a couple dozen, like 100? Is there a number that you think could be, like, if you listen to this many business books, you probably can graduate to like another?
Probably was
Do you remember?
50 or something. Because I feel, and by business, I mean there's obviously so many micro segments to having a successful business. But yeah, probably 50. I just felt I got tired of it and it was repetitive and I wasn't really learning as much. But obviously, for example, if I started, really being like as a CEO and maybe now I have great partners that do a lot of the managing and stuff right now and I can stay in my genius. But let's just say I get a wild hair in my ass and want to start this passion project in a couple years. I'll probably go back into maybe like books about leadership and team building and stuff like that. But for where I was at and what my genius was, I felt like because I'm a generalist at my core, right? Like I wouldn't say I'm an expert at any topic or close to an expert at any topic. So I got to the point where my brain just said, hey, I don't think reading more at this point is going to benefit. And then I started just a lot of personal development, spiritual stuff, relationship stuff, world history, more personal development mindset. That's where the shift started happening.
Have you found there's a lot of people that do Audible that are excelling or do some type of reading that are how many entrepreneurs do you come across that don't read or do read, or is it like a lot of
I mean, I don't think I hang out with anybody. I don't consider anybody a close friend that doesn't engage in regular personal growth. Some of the most successful people I know read all the time. I think that's a trait where I know people that are extremely financially successful that still will read a book every couple weeks. Because they know there's still so much to learn, right? And I think that's the biggest shift too, is you realize how much you don't know in so many areas of life. For me, the biggest thing I feel like that's limited my success lately is, my like relationship style and my attachment style and the anxiety I get in all types of relationships, romantic, personal, business. So I've read a lot of books as of late that talk about, healthy relationships and dealing with anxiety in relationships and stuff like that, right? That's just one like micro topic in our lives. So I think once you realize there's a book for every problem you have, which is exciting. There's a lot of books for every problem you have. It's just once you have a problem, I actually get excited. Like, I don't know if you're the same way, but if you're having some challenge in your life, I'm really looking forward to reading a book on this subject.
Yeah, I'm all over the place, dude. You know that.
Yeah, I think you just
I got books everywhere. I'm just always surrounded by books.
What do you like better, Audible or physical?
I'll say that I, like yourself, well, audio listening saved my life. But I conditioned myself to read in my like physical reading, and I've noticed it's improved over the last 2 years that I've conditioned time to do it. But audio has saved my life. I'd like to elaborate on that. Everyone wants to continue listening for when I come on Openly Outspoken in the next couple weeks. We can dive into that. I won't forget that question. What have you? And so, yeah, that's a perfect segue, because I wanted to get I want to understand Openly Outspoken and what has occurred for you from doing this show, which every day or every couple of days I see another guest and really great insights, and there's just so much there and so many different topics. What has that been like? It's been a year now too. It's been a year. And what episode are you on?
Yeah, coming up on I think you'll be 49, or this will be 49, right? So just under a year now, and
that's a lot. I mean, all things considering, the podcast culture, that's a lot of conversations in a year when you have businesses to run.
Yeah, I mean, there are times when business was busy and that I considered putting the show on pause, but I'm glad I haven't. I think there's been some takeaways for me. I some combination of, I have a skill of talking with people and communicating and finding common ground with lots of different types of people, with different viewpoints. And I just think that people really aren't that different. I mean, I've gone into episodes thinking that we're just going to have some big argument and big disagreements, and we don't. So maybe that's partially my ability to communicate, but I think a lot of it is also we're just really not that different, and most humans want the same things. Most humans are insecure. They're just looking for happiness. So yeah, I mean, I typically get solid takeaways and solid relationships from these episodes as well. I mean, I've only had one person ever say they don't want to be on the show.
That you've asked.
I've asked, right? So,
wow.
I haven't really. Most of the people that have been on the show today are people I have relationships with, and I thought I would be expanding outside of that quicker, but I have realized I've just created a lot of relationships over the years. So, but I will be expanding outside of those relationships, and it will be a combination of new people.
What do you mean? You how did you pick the people? Yeah.
When I initially started the show, I wrote down maybe 15 or 20 that I wanted to target. But then after I started getting through those, there were people I realized that I wanted to have on multiple times, like yourself. So I've had a few people on multiple times. And then I realized there's other people on my network that I want to interview. So outside of a few, everybody I have had some sort of relationship with. Some obviously stronger than others. But the good thing about a podcast, especially once you have a little bit of traction and some big names on your show, is it's a great way to connect with almost anybody. I mean, 1% or one person turned down out of, I mean, that's so far that's about 2%. Yeah, 2%. Denial rate. And if I really was persistent, I probably could make it happen. It was just like, hey, the timing's not great for me right now, type thing. And maybe that's a great way to just connect with almost anyone. Maybe there's certain people that would say no, but most humans, I believe at this point, that are of influence will be interested in. And then that from a relationship standpoint, it's a very natural way to build a relationship. So then after you have, like Shay, for example.
It was so weird. I was just thinking of her in my head.
Shay I knew for years. We hadn't talked in a while because I knew she was she broke up with her boyfriend and started a new business and blah, blah, blah. But it kind of reconnected that relationship. She ended up speaking at and joining the mastermind because of it, and now we're much closer. So without this podcast, and her episode is great too, by the way. So it accomplishes a lot, right? It allows listeners to hopefully get some entertainment or value. It allows me to learn and grow. It allows me to connect with people authentically. And it, if you want to use it as a a business development tool, which I haven't purposely done that with anybody. I haven't had anybody on that I'm just like, hey, I want to do business with this person. It's just kind of happened naturally because of a relationship, and we're like, oh, this makes sense, right? This makes sense
Wow.
to do together, and it just it accomplishes a lot. So I'm grateful for that. And you know what else is crazy about this show is I still get people that'll tell me they listen or they listen to one of my episodes or whatever, and I've never knew they listened. They never like or engage on anything. And they're like, yeah, I've been listening for this whole time. Like there was a guy I had a New Year's party.
Wow.
I remember I met him one time at a New Year's party that I had here. He was a friend of a friend. And I was just walking around downtown Orlando, and we like recognized each other. And he's like, hey, man, I've been listening to your podcast. I really like it. I like how you like approach topics. And I didn't even know he listened. He never comments on anything. And he tells me he's been listening for months. So I hear stuff like that, and that gives me some joy and satisfaction when I know people in my life are engaging and listening.
What would be your advice to someone that on why not to do a podcast?
I mean, I would say don't do it if you're doing it to just like be Joe Rogan, you know, like don't do it to just try to build the biggest podcast. I think that like even Joe Rogan will say like it just became big out of necessity. I think Joe Rogan just was in the right place at the right time. Not he's consistent. I mean, but like his first few hundred episodes, I mean, was like the listener total compared to what he has today is like substantial, right? I think he just was in a great place at the right time. I think a bunch of people were just pissed off on news media. They wanted alternate places to, yeah, I mean, I think just doing it because it's something you're passionate about. And I was working with this podcast consultant when I was starting it, and they're like, you have to have a niche, you have to have like a theme. And I'm just like, I don't feel like talking about the same shit every week. Just whatever feels good for me, I want to talk about. And that's why I did the show. I didn't do it to like have a bunch of like try to, you know, maybe part of me was like, hey, a big following would be cool. But I like talking about a lot of subjects and talking to people about a lot of different things. And I was like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I enjoy. And this is what I'm going to start a podcast on. So,
yeah. What was the main? Did it take time to do it? Meaning, you said I want to do this. From I want to do this to when you actually did it.
Yeah. I think
how long was that, and then what type of thinking was associated with that?
COVID lockdowns are what finally motivated me to launch it. I've been thinking about doing a podcast for years, but I just, for whatever reason, just all the bullshit excuses I made in my head. I'm not ready. People won't listen. Blah, 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 blah. And when there was some weird thing that as Americans, especially, we should all be terrified of. And this is not, it shouldn't be considered a conservative viewpoint. This should be an American viewpoint. There was an alarming amount of censorship for the first time in my lifetime during COVID lockdowns. And I just, not that there's not a ton of areas for this country to improve, but I mean, the First Amendment is a very valuable thing to me. And not a lot of countries, there's literally billions of people on this planet right now where if you shit talk your leader, you're going to like go to jail. Like we have the First Amendment, and that should be protected and exercised at all costs. And there was some stuff that I just thought was really hypocritical and really stupid that I'm like, hey, I need to exercise my First Amendment right and just have a conversation about it. And so that was the motivation, I think, were the lockdowns and censorship for me to finally speak up on certain things.
You've had a lot of different people on the show. Have you found anyone that disagrees with the First Amendment?
I don't believe so. I think there's some gray area around hate speech. There are some people I know that are kind of for hate, quote unquote, hate speech, whatever the fuck that means, being regulated. But fortunately, I think most people are for the First Amendment. I will
So
say.
do you mean that you think, or go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like I think, and don't like quote me on this, but I think I maybe talked to some people from Canada, and maybe not even on the show, but that the Canadian viewpoint, which is wild because you kind of view them as pretty similar to Americans, but Donald Trump, for example, there's a lot of people, and some of them American, they believe because Donald Trump's speech alleged leads to violence, he should be silenced, right? So there is some gray area there. I don't think any speech should be censored at all. And I think most Americans, most people on the right, center, and even center left, just moderate, reasonable Democrats, which is most of the party, I will say, they're the silent majority, believe that speech should be protected. But there is, I think, a loud minority that does believe if speech leads to violence or some hate speech, which again, I don't even know how you quantify or calculate that, because something for me may trigger me and cause me to be violent when like something for you may not. Like I don't, that's where it gets gray, and I think that's why it was First Amendment for a reason. But yeah,
So do you think that those people believe in the First Amendment, but they don't, but they also believe that hate speech is, so they'd say, oh, I believe in the First Amendment, but I don't believe in hate speech. That meaning those two ideas actually contradict. So consciously they'd be, hey, I believe in the First Amendment. If you ask them, if you have enough conversation, they'd be like, yeah, I believe in that.
You and me both know. You and me both. Yeah, no, of course it contradicts each other. That's why the First Amendment doesn't have a line about hate speech. Like you can't hate speech to you, maybe love speech to me. I don't know, right? But that's the point. That's why all speech is protected. Once you start regulating speech, yeah. I mean, again, it just became. It was unfortunate and very, very scary that. Whether even Alex Jones' viewpoint, for example, right? Like he's very extreme. He was hated on for basically his entire existence from a majority of people in the media. He just has a different viewpoint, and you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to listen to him. But I think having the Alex Jones types are good for our society. Most of what he says, I think, is probably on the extreme side, but every once in a while, he's pretty accurate with what he's saying, and he challenges a lot of narratives that most of Americans seem to just accept and live by. But yeah, I think we should, living in this country, be very grateful that we have something in place to protect our speech. And you and me both know that hate speech, if you're offended by something, that says more about you than the person. Obviously, if someone's being hateful and mean, that says something about them too, but we can't control our people. You can't control how you feel. And if you're offended by a random person saying anything about you, I think there's some self-accountability there to look at before trying to argue that the First Amendment is a good idea because of you being offended.
Have there been anyone on the show that had a different point of view than you, and your view moved even slightly more to their view?
It probably happens all the time. I mean, I think as humans, our viewpoints naturally evolve. And that's okay, right? Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Hillary Clinton in the late 2000s were all against gay marriage, and which is pretty wild that wasn't that long ago. And now they're pretty much unanimously, I think, politicians are for gay marriage, right? And that's just in a 10-year shift. That Democrats were against gay marriage like 10 years ago. So I think it's just naturally viewpoints shift and evolve over time with you when you have more experience in education, and that's okay, right? A few hundred years ago, slavery was all over the world, and now there are still forms of slavery that exist, but it's shifted pretty heavily, and most modern societies can agree that slavery is not a good thing, right? I mean, viewpoints shift and change. For me specifically, it's hard to think of one example top of mind, but I'm sure there are some.
Well, what percentage of the people that you've had on the show would you say very different beliefs than you? Because I know you have had people totally different, which already is rare. Because a lot of people just could you think of a percentage or roughly or?
I mean, I would say my viewpoint in general, like I disagree and agree with a lot of conservatives, just to put in two buckets, conservative and liberal. I disagree with both parties on a lot of things, and I agree with both parties on a lot of things because I'm very libertarian, right? So I'm a capitalist, small government, low taxation, which conservatives like, but I'm also more agnostic, atheist. I'm not religious. I think the fact that conservatives focus on social issues, and again, they haven't been as much lately, which is good, but I don't like the conservative focus on social issues. So I don't I think drugs and sex work should be legalized. So a lot of conservatives don't agree with me on that, even close friends. And then I have friends left leaning of me that we agree on a lot of things, but don't agree on a lot of economic issues and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people I have on, we don't agree on everything. Again, I'm sure my mindset has shifted because I feel like what's the point of reading and interviewing people and having conversations if you're not going to be open to some shift? I think one that comes to mind was the racism topic. I've had a handful of episodes about that. And I think maybe where my mindset evolved a bit was a lot of the frustration was just feeling a certain way. And I think I think if you look at the news, which both sides of the news are very, very polarizing and typically one-sided, it's hard to gauge and get anything. But if you look at the BLM riots and stuff like that, most Americans can agree any type of violence, looting, burning shit down is completely uncalled for and completely unnecessary. And I think where I maybe agreed with the conservatives was that stuff needs to be condoned and that stuff needs to be stopped. That's completely unacceptable and it's very, very bad for society, any type of violence. That's not protesting. That's not what the First Amendment protects. But then maybe where my mindset shifted is I think there was just a feeling of a lot of Black Americans of frustration, of being, again, going back to the class, of being disproportionately low income, of being just, it was a lot of built up frustration. And so I empathized with Black Americans more than I did before. Not that I condone violence, or not that I agree with any type of violence or breaking the law, sure, right? But I think I empathize with, hey, it's frustration. And this is maybe not the best way to handle the frustration, but most people, when they're frustrated, don't handle things the most rational ways, right? And I think I've had friends that have had bad experiences with police, and when you've just dealt with that multiple times over your life, I think it was just maybe fed up with dealing with it. And so just stuff like that. But then I would still challenge their viewpoint. It's like, hey, we've come a long way. We're definitely come a long way since the 1960s and since the 1800s, and which is true, right? But I think I just empathize with the other viewpoint a little more than I would have if I just watched the news and didn't have these more challenging racial conversations.
So I'd like to acknowledge that what you're doing, having conversations with people that you disagree with, is, I don't know a lot of people that do that. So it's very rare. I think our culture needs it. What's your advice to people on how to do that?
Well,
how do you talk to somebody that you don't agree with? I mean, I think you could actually create a course on this.
I don't think there's that much disagreement, I think, is the possible mindset shift. I mean, if, like, my friend LaShawn, he has, we talked about race, he has a big distrust issue with the police, right? So, and again, this is the thing, right, is a lot of data will show, and I've been pretty outspoken about, police violence is actually not that bad compared to a lot of other things going on. And the data supports that. But should we focus on training police better and stuff like that? Yes, I think, in getting rid of immunity laws and stuff, I think. But when LaShawn would share, hey, I can't remember the exact number, but I've had 3 instances in my life where a cop either pointed a gun at me, threw me to the ground. If somebody has that experience in their life, it's hard for you to then tell them, no, police care about you. You kind of understand, okay, I understand why you don't have a lot of trust for police based on your experience. You don't necessarily have to agree with the other person's viewpoint on everything, but you can at least understand why he feels that way. And I think that, for me, has been one of the biggest takeaways, is not agreeing with their viewpoint, but understanding why. And sometimes you do agree with their viewpoint, obviously, but you understand why he would have that viewpoint if he just shared that, like, for no reason at all, no criminal background, nothing. Cops have been physically violent with him X amount of times. So I could understand why you feel a certain way about the cops and why cops treat you differently than white people, right? It's hard for me to convince him he should trust the cops at that point. So then me and him can, probably agree that, defund the police type narratives are stupid and we shouldn't get rid of the police. Like, most people agree that that's the dumbest marketing message of all time, defund the police. But we can agree that, hey, there should be probably something done, because police should not treat anybody like that, right? So we can agree on a lot of things. And so, those experiences or those conversations just maybe help me, I think. And there's an important difference to have empathy and understanding compared to agreeing. Again, you don't have to agree with them, but you can understand why they feel that way. Another stupid example, but if you grew up super low income and at a simple level, if you're not very knowledgeable about economics or haven't done a ton of research on the pros and cons of minimum wage, if you just aren't very into politics and don't really give a shit, you just care about taking care of your family and having fun, at the simplest level, you could say, yeah, minimum wage raising makes sense, right? So you don't necessarily have to. That's where I'm more of a free market capitalist guy, but I can understand why somebody that's grown up generation after generation low income would like the idea of increased minimum wage, right?
So when you have these conversations of these big topics of people disagree on, unbelievably, you mentioned earlier with the news and whatnot, how it's so polarized, are you thinking in the other person's point of view first before you even You're thinking, well, how are they approaching? Is that how you're thinking in your brain? Like, how are they what's presupposing their concept? Are you thinking like, what's their life like? Where are they coming from? Is that what's giving you empathy, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have an actual conversation and spend time with somebody, you know, you invest 2 hours and they're just sharing about a tough experience in their life, it's hard for almost any human to not, if it's a shitty experience, to have some feeling for that. If they had, the cop took me out, threw me on the ground, and pointed the gun at me. It's really hard to listen to that and be like, you should love cops. Why don't you love cops after that? Like, get over it, you know? Like, so I think it's just being willing to have the conversation in the first place and listen.
Powerful.
And know that I think there's a balance for me. Is like, I'm pretty confident in my viewpoints, but I do have openness to shift. And, you know, I think if you're going to, you know, I don't think you want to just be complete wishy-washy and not have any backbone or confidence in what you believe. But I do think it's leave a little bit of space for growth and evolution in your viewpoint is healthy.
Has politics hurt your business? Talking about it. I'm asking for the world. So I'm hearing in my head everyone saying, God, if I talk about this or if I talk about that, I'm never going to be able to eat. I'm never going to be able to sleep.
Well, fortunately, not too many people care what I say, right? So I'm not like, I don't have like millions.
I disagree.
I have millions I don't have millions of followers, or just, I'm not like big on Twitter or anything like that. I think, for me, if anything, it's been better because I have generated relationships with a very well-rounded group of people. I have people that are pretty similar to me ideologically. I have people further right. I have people left. I have, I've built a good rounded group of people in my life. So, and we have, you know, most of our clients and brands that we work with for like the agency side, most entrepreneurs, I would say, kind of lean like that libertarian viewpoint that I've dealt with. They just don't want to be taxed like crazy. They just want to be left alone. They don't really care what again, most people in our mastermind are probably more libertarian.
What, do you find that they stay out of a lot of that and they're focused just on their life and their business?
I mean, you almost have to be a successful entrepreneur. I mean, you can't be consumed by thinking the world's going to end on the news and then invest $100,000 in a new piece of equipment the same day to grow your business. Like, you kind of just got to be in your little bubble.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then obviously we have some conservative leaning brands on the e-com side, which I don't know how many of those customers even know I exist, but they may not agree with everything I say. They're definitely not when it comes to abortion and stuff. You know, a lot of our customers are very, very conservative, but I think if there's one takeaway, and I see this more out of conservatives, and that's where I think I've leaned a little bit more conservative the last year plus. I think there is starting to get an acceptance of just like allowing people to believe what they want to believe. I think conservatives have done a better job of reaching out towards the libertarians as of late, which a lot of conservatives don't agree with libertarians' ideologically on a lot of things. We talked about that, abortion and sex work and drug laws and stuff like that. But I do feel there is a greater acceptance of different viewpoints, and because I think, like conservatives, libertarians like myself, I mean, if you read any history book, and I know you've read a few, a lot of people sacrificed a lot for us to be in this country. So I value being in this country as much as anybody, and I write that regularly in my journal. I'm just really grateful to be an American. I think most people in this country can agree that we're grateful to be here. So that's a good starting point.
Do you know a lot of business owners that watch the news? Either channel, whatever.
I don't know. I think a lot of the people I deal with mostly are more around my age. So I think people like you and me watch the news a lot less, right? Cable in general has just drastically lost ratings the last 10 years. I think we get our news from different places. I think outlets like Joe Rogan and stuff are better for hearing different viewpoints. So
yeah, I didn't own a TV for a decade.
Some of my older friends, I think, watch the news a little bit more just because it's something they've always done. But it's definitely not something that they watch like 4 hours a day. I mean, it's like, hey, maybe like whatever side, if you're more left, watch an hour of CNN, watch an hour of Fox News as you're eating breakfast, read a little bit of the Wall Street Journal, read a little bit of the New York Times, like just to kind of get an idea of what's happening in the world, but not like living by it and just letting it control your life. I think that seems to be a common theme about people close to me.
What do you think is going to happen with business, and are businesses going to become more political?
I mean, I think businesses right now that are like ours, that are openly saying like, hey, we're very, very openly with these brands, right? And by the way, something that's important for us and we decided this as a company. As owners, a lot of us have different political viewpoints and maybe lean left certain areas, but what we all do agree on is, we are patriots. We do love the country. We value freedom of speech. We value capitalism and entrepreneurship. And so a lot of our brands really, really focus on those sorts of things. We're not selling stuff that's like pro-life, per se. It's just stuff that kind of aligns with us as owners on the things we do value, which now tend to lean more conservative. Obviously, when we were selling a lot of Donald Trump products, that was us just capitalizing on, his fan base was very passionate about him. And but ultimately we identify as a conservative leaning organization for our e-commerce brands, and I think that appeals to a lot of people. I mean, half of the country, give or take, voted for Donald Trump and has conservative values, and half the country is a lot of people. So just because half the country hates you doesn't mean you still can't have a really successful business. I don't think that's a horrible thing. I think there's some businesses that try to appeal to everybody, and I think there's some businesses that do better when they have a clear brand voice.
Wow.
I can't remember the comedian's name, but the girl I've been seeing that you met, she really loves this comedian that is very left-leaning. She's very feminist. She's very, some of her stuff's funny. I'm not her ideal demo, but I told her after seeing the show, I was like, I kind of like the show. Talks about female dating experiences and stuff like that. Her demo is not me, but she very, very much as a comedian, knows her avatar, and she could probably give two shits if I like her or not. Right?
Powerful.
I think that's okay as a business too. You don't have to shit. She's not shitting on white men, but she's not making her content appealing to white men either. I'm not in our viewpoints, we can appeal to our base without saying that, everybody that likes AOC is a giant piece of shit. That's not what we believe. We do believe that that there's like this wokeness and some like softness to this small minority of mostly on the left. I think even moderate Democrats will agree with that, which like is true to us. But we don't just shit talk and think they're like horrible people. We just don't agree, and we go after the people that we know are gonna buy our products, which again is a very, very big market. I'd rather appeal to that market than not appeal to anybody.
Have you had instances where your campaigns were canceled, censored?
Of course. I mean, our ads were banned off of Facebook and Google from October-ish of 2020 till February, if they had anything to do with what Facebook and Google deem it's political. So anything with Donald Trump on it, anything with something to do with Trump, Trump was very polarizing. But in their defense, I will say, anything to do with Biden or Kamala or something was also from the paid side banned. Now, from the organic side, I do think there was a bunch of unfair treatment to more conservative-leaning viewpoints. That's, I think, pretty obvious. But from a paid side, from what I saw, they were pretty down the middle. Anything political related just wasn't allowed on Facebook and Google for that 4-month period. So we were selling certain products that was just maybe military themed or whatever, but a lot of our products, a lot of our Trump themed collectibles did very well. Obviously, again, whether you like Trump or don't like him, he had a very passionate and loyal fan base that wanted to buy a lot of Trump products. So we, for about 4 months or so, weren't allowed to advertise anything that had to do with Donald Trump. Even if it was like a military-themed product but had Donald Trump in the ad, that would get banned. So we had to reposition a lot of our offers to...
Wait, from October, November, December, during the election season?
Yeah, basically the entire...
Wait, but what was the reasoning for that?
Because, I mean, from what I understand, Facebook was deemed to have a very, very big influence on Donald Trump winning in 2016 because like the Russian hackers theory and stuff like that. So I think it was just a safer play to ban all political ads. So Facebook and Google weren't under a microscope of possibly interfering with the election. And by the way, you have to be, a lot of people don't know this, but Facebook requires you to verify your identity to run any political ads now too. So that's just not as a business level, but that's on a media buyer level too. So anybody running any type of political ad for us has to be verified as some sort of like U.S. resident or citizen. So they'll send something in the mail to identify your physical address just to run the political ads, because there was a lot of accusation of foreigners running these ads and interfering in the election. So Facebook is trying to clean that up quite a bit.
What do you think the ramifications will be of this type of interaction? Like, take, DJ out of here. I mean, obviously, that's just a person. The people fit positions. So what do you think? What do you think is going to happen next? What is this? Does this change? What's your opinion on all that involvement? And it's not obviously not an easy conversation because.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is, and I talked about this on my episode last week with Ed, the CEO of Goodwill Central Florida. I think there finally is some bipartisan agreement that the big tech companies are too big and have too much power. The left really cares about it from a monopolization standpoint, just too big a business. And I think the right like Sinner, I'm like Sinner right. I think I have felt that way for a while with some of these big companies. Like they're too big where they're like basically monopolies. They're almost utilities and they should just be treated a little bit different. But I think even most of the Republican Party now agrees that these companies have some level of overinflated power or influence on our society, and they can just, overnight, for whether they have the right to or not, whether it's in the terms of services or not, I think most people can agree these companies just have a ton of power and there should be some sort of regulation. So I do think it could be a blessing in disguise to end up having a bipartisan agreement to have some sort of restructure of big tech and some of these big companies to reduce the power. But again, it creates market opportunity. I mean, that's the wild thing about capitalism, right? It created market opportunity for somebody like Parler to come in and get market share, right? You tell a bunch of people.
I just thought, like you just said, capitalism. I'm thinking freedom.
Well, yeah. So capitalism.
That's the great thing about freedom.
I'm a pure capitalist in most areas. I think it does get tricky when companies get so big, especially they get so a lot of the growth that Amazon, for example, received in the last year wasn't capitalism. It was government restrictions allowing people not to go leave their fucking house, so they have no option to purchase stuff on Amazon. So that's anti-capitalism. It forced people, the government got in the way and forced people to do business with certain entities, with certain entities, right? So, but there's some exceptions from a capitalistic standpoint, like I guess in the 1800s, I guess Rockefeller owned the railroads, right? So if you own the railroads, you become a monopoly where you can control prices on everything that's delivered inside the entire country, and you can dictate, you can just tell certain products or services they can't exist, right? Because you have so much power. So that's where capitalism does get a little bit gray, where I think some slight government intervention is acceptable. But people that are like, I'll hear comments about like bailouts. Like bailouts aren't even pure capitalism. Like during the 2008 like financial crisis, all these bailouts were given out, and pure capitalism would have been just let them fail, which is in many cases, you should argue, should have been what happened. So these companies learn. Now, when you have government intervention, that's where it gets, like, that's where COVID, like, we're just going to be paying the price for this for years for all these lockdowns. You tell people they can't travel. So, of course, airlines are going to suffer financially. So then it's like, does it make sense to bail out these airlines? Well, like, should they be managed properly? Maybe, but then if we just let all these airlines go out of business and then we open the country back up, like, how are people going to travel? Like, travel is a very important part of commerce and consumer spending, and so it gets a little tricky, right? But I typically lean on the side of just let companies fail. Not having government intervention at any level when it comes to bailouts. But yeah, when companies are just getting so big, which is what we see is happening, I think, with social media companies getting involved. And again, we talked about this last week too. I mean, a lot of these big, giant companies like Amazon are paying like almost no corporate tax. So if you think about that, a company that big that's achieved so much growth paying little to no corporate tax. And granted, they are paying tons of other types of taxes. They're paying lots of tax on like all their employees are paying taxes, and shareholders may be paying taxes on income. I mean, there's a lot of tax revenue collected because of Amazon, but that just starts getting a little fishy. A company like that, Amazon, is not only a monopoly at this point, you could argue, but they're not paying corporate tax. So like even guys like me who lean more conservative libertarian are like, okay, something should be done. I don't know what the solution is though, because I'm not an expert in these areas, but I think most people can agree that sounds a little fishy.
What, I guess on a final note, because this is awesome transition for plenty of exploration or our next interaction together. What do you see are the opportunities for people listening for themselves as just individuals who, hey, may not have the answers for these big questions, but they're living their life and they want success to some degree. You've done a lot through helping companies do paid marketing, yourself internally, now personal brand with your podcast, conversations, business development. What's your advice? Where do you see opportunities are, all things considered, from our conversation?
Just advice to people?
Yeah, and how they are there
learn.
opportunities? Because there's a very scary time if you focus on the meta. It's like, where are things going?
Well, give me a second because I'm going to pee. I'm just going to pause for 1 second. I'll be right back.
All right.
Okay?
Well, you'll be the first to pee on the podcast.
Yeah. I just couldn't help myself. I just was drinking so much liquids before this. I'll be right back.
Yeah, go. It's all good.
So I guess the first word of advice would be never hold a pee right before a podcast conversation. I was like, yeah, I don't think I have to go too bad. But then 2 hours later, your bladder can only contain so much. So
This is the most profound information of the episode.
yeah, I think
it's actually
wasn't there a king or something that died from holding, or a prince or something, someone significant that died from holding a pee so long that his like bladder bursted?
People will have to send in, if you find out who that was, let us know, because I have no idea.
I think that was like the one thing I remember from middle school world history or something. There was some world leader or prince or something that it was rude to get up, so he just held his pee and his bladder bursted. Maybe I'm making this up, I don't know, but it sounds, maybe it's a wives' tale too, but
I gotta
so
look
what
that up. Who
what
died
was the who died holding their own pee?
This would be interesting if it came off very quickly.
I'm surprised you don't know that.
Tycho Brahe, killed by holding his pee. Through his name might not ring any bells, this 16th century Danish nobleman is known for his innovative views on astronomy. He's considered by many to have been nearly as important as Copernicus in terms of developing our modern understanding of space and planets. Now, maybe there's more. Maybe this is just one man of many. Women, all sorts of people. But yeah, that popped up real quick. That's an interesting thought, though, how I was just able to find that out in like 2 seconds.
That's a good example to what your question was. There's nothing. I will see social posts about minimum wage and blah blah blah. Like, if you want to be successful and you're not earning more money, you should just look in the mirror, especially if you're in the US or some other Western European or civilized nation. Like, there's so much access to information. If you're not taking advantage of that, that's on you. Like, minimum wage laws aren't going to change your life. Politicians aren't going to change your life. if you want to learn any trade, any skill, for the most part, maybe not open heart surgery, but you probably get a pretty good idea. You can learn it online. If you mindset, happiness, relationships, I mean, there's information out there that can help. So if you're still in your life in a bad relationship or not where you want to be financially or whatever it is, there's information out there, and it's most likely that you're just being too lazy and not taking personal accountability. Minimum wage laws or politicians aren't gonna improve your life. It's gonna be like, those actions you take, information, the people you're around. So I mean, that's what I've been so focused on, right? And even for myself, I live downtown Orlando, which has served me very well. It's very party focused. UCF is the biggest college campus in the country, so there's a lot of fun stuff happening downtown Orlando. But I feel that I've outgrown that. I don't really want to be around it as much, and so I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself to relocate, because I feel it's what's holding me back is my surrounding on a day-to-day. I have an amazing network, but just like going down, walking around downtown, just hearing bars and loud music and clubs all the time, it was fun while it lasted, but I think I'm ready for the next chapter. And I'm figuring out what that is in this moment. But I will be in a new location by the end of 2021.
Well, I look forward to doing an in-person, openly outspoken Culture Matters interaction. And when you do that, brother, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you all for listening to the Culture Matters podcast, and please check out Openly Outspoken, which now I'm realizing, again, once again, we're actually doing them both at the same time, which is really cool and interesting to me. So I guess just thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.